Hello, NCAA men's basketball fans. The excitement is here. All the guessing is over. It is finally tournament time. No speculating on who's going to win what. They're in. So it's your Trogs here, the two really old guys, talking about sports. I'm Jeff Zink, and I'm here with Jim Reaker to get right into it. So how you doing today, Jim?
Doing great. Coming to you a little bit later than usual here in the evening hours. A little snow on the ground, but it is March Madness, so we're all excited.
Well, we will look back a little bit. We'll be talking about a lot of things. We'll be talking about the 68 and can Villanova repeat, and who might be the upset specials. Will there be a 2 over a 15 or a 5 over a 12 or all those sweet things? And Jim and I won't announce them, but we'll be trading our Sweet 16s. But we'll start with your thoughts from tournament week. As I said last week, usually the tournament time is a time for those teams that are on the bubble to play their way into the tournament. Usually the teams that are in it hardly ever play their way out of it. But tournament week, any thoughts on that before we go into the 68?
No, it pretty much went as I thought it would, especially the three conferences that I cover very well. As you notice, I picked 2 of the 3 winners. And the Big Ten, I knew that somebody would get hot and win it. It seems to always be that way, that it's not the top leaders of the conference that usually win it. It's somebody else that gets hot. I just couldn't figure out who that was. I went ahead and picked Purdue. Of course, they got beat in the first round by Michigan. But Michigan, number 8, that was the team I was looking for that was going to get hot and find their way through the tournament in that special week they had after sliding off the runway up in Detroit.
Still there?
Hello.
Yeah. Just cut out there for a little bit. Okay, that's true. You want to go ahead and so you got Michigan? Yeah, you did pretty good. So we'll talk about that. I mean, you predicted that there would be 7 teams in from the Big Ten, and they did get 7. That was the one conference you were off on because you picked Purdue, Michigan, and the Big 12. You were a little off. You said they'd get 5. They actually got 6. But the big pick there, you called for Iowa State to win that tournament, and they came through. And in the Big East, you had a prediction of 7, and 7 did come through, and Villanova was the conference champion. For me, I got 2 of the champions wrong, but picked dead right on the number of teams in each conference. I guess we got to call that a push a little bit there, because
we both win.
The ACC did get 9, the SEC got 5, the Pac-12 got 4. I was off on the ACC, but like I said, any one of those top 6 teams could have won it. But this time it was Duke with the hot hand. Kentucky won the SEC. It was Arizona coming through in the Pac-12, which could have been any one of those top 3 teams. Unfortunately, Oregon loses Chris Boucher, and that's going to really cost them come tournament time. But the tournament itself, like you said, Jim, there are very few surprises, especially in the lesser tournaments. There were a couple of teams there that played their way in. The Michigan team that you talked about. Also in one of your conferences, Kansas State needed a couple of big wins, and they played well in the tournament, came through. And Rhode Island, which started off the year in the top 25 and slid out, came through in the A-10 and played their way into the tournament. But unfortunately, you've got teams like Syracuse, which lost in the first round, Illinois State, which lost to Wichita State. And as we talked for a couple of weeks, they weren't going to give that conference, the Missouri Valley Conference, 2 picks. So they left out. And one of the media darlings all year has been was Texas Arlington, which could not win its conference tournament. So they're on the outside looking in. But I'm with you, not a whole lot of surprises that are out there. But there may be a few. I mean, the surprises of, your thoughts on who were some of the surprise ins and outs, or some of the surprise seeds, and in particular the locations?
Well, a couple issues I have, and you mentioned it already. Kansas State, and again, they did have a couple big wins in the tournament, and they've had a couple close calls with the Jayhawks of Kansas. I think they've lost by 2 and 3 points in their 2 league games there. But here's the problem I have with Kansas State being in. They didn't have a winning record in the Big 12. And, again, I think if you look at my pick, I picked I picked 5 bids for the Big 12, and them putting Kansas State in, that screwed me up. And, again, I think it almost like the bowls where they say if you don't have at least a 500 record, you shouldn't go to a bowl in football. I think the NCAA should step in and say the same thing. They were 8-10 in the Big 12. And, yeah, one of the things that got them in, too, is strength of schedule, but they didn't win a lot of those games. Another team, let me ask you this question. Does Michigan State get in if their coach is not named Tom Izzo? Because if you look at that, they have almost the identical overall record of Iowa, and they do have the identical Big Ten record of Iowa. Iowa doesn't get in. Now, again, they're going to say strength of schedule. Remember, Michigan State played UK, Arizona, Baylor, and Duke, but also they didn't beat any of them. So, again, sometimes that strength of schedule, I think, goes a little bit too far. Yeah, you could, you know who had the number one strongest schedule in the entire country?
I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's not in because they only won about 11 games. So, again, that strength of schedule, it does say something, but you got to win some of those games. And here's one other team that I really kind of feel bad for is Utah. Utah, they actually finished a game ahead of USC in the standings. And USC, you can look at their schedule. They won, I think, 4 more games overall. But their schedule is very, very weak. And I remember talking about that early on. Remember when they were undefeated that they really didn't play anybody early on. But they had 24 wins. I think Utah's 20. But Utah won 1 more Pac-12 game, but still Utah's playing in the NIT, and USC got that 4th bid for the Pac-12. Those are the problems I have. I feel sorry for Illinois State. Again, they won a lot of games. They went 17-1 in their league and lost in the final game to a very, very good Wichita State. Of course, a lot of people think that the point total in that game, I think they lost by 20 points, maybe had a bearing on keeping them out. And I was just reading they are probably the first team that didn't get in, or the last one out, or however you want to put that. So you got to feel sorry for them. They had a great season and did almost everything they did. And I see their coach tweeted today to all the Power 5 conferences that he'd like to play anybody that wants to come and play him. He said he's tried to play a tougher schedule, but sometimes I guess people don't want to go to Illinois State or play Illinois State, the Redbirds.
Yeah, all good points. And this happens every year. The teams that are there, we said a couple of weeks ago that Illinois State or Wichita State, whoever won that was probably going to go, and the other might be on the bubble depending upon what happens. You also have an ACC, which could have had 10 or 12 teams in there with some people. I mean, yeah, they had the last. I mean, when you talk about not having a winning record, and even though strength of schedule, you got to be careful because then your beloved Xavier becomes more suspect. But they kind of played their way into the tournament there with a couple of big wins and good games by beating Butler and Creighton. So there's every year you're going to come into that. I've got no problem with Kansas State being in there. Of course, it all becomes, why do they belong over in Illinois State, or why do they belong over at Utah? And those are the ones that they really scramble on. But the people in the room, they've been watching games. Tom Izzo, you could say the opposite of it, which is, why isn't Syracuse in? And because of Jim Boeheim. Is it because the NCAA likes Tom Izzo more than Jim Boeheim, or Jim Boeheim took a shot at him with his 1,000 wins? That's also a Syracuse team, which was one of the final ones in last year, went to the Final Four. But they lost their first tournament game. It's just, there's no way to do it equitably except what I suggested a couple weeks ago when we played devil's advocate, which is to put everybody in it. I know you said they get that by playing in their tournament championships, but this is where you could see how one tournament works against another rather than beating up on each other. And then maybe an Illinois State and Wichita State can go further. Until they go to something like that, this weekend this Monday is always going to be somebody saying, why did? For me, before we go back into that, the sense that I can't make up is still calling these brackets regional and geographic brackets. it seems crazy to me, and not just because I'm a graduate and a fan, that 6th seed Cincinnati is put into the South bracket, but goes to play their first 2 games in Sacramento, California. Now, last I checked, that's not in the South. And in the West bracket, 4 teams have to travel to Buffalo, New York. Now, most of those teams are already toward the East, so, I mean, you can just not call it a West bracket. But some teams kind of get screwed by that, whereas you've got a team that's in a West bracket playing in Orlando, so Florida State and Florida Gulf Coast, even though they're playing each other, they're basically playing at home. This is the craziness that I see sometimes. When, like I say, you've got the Midwest bracket and the South bracket going to Sacramento, and the West bracket playing in Buffalo, New York. And I know these teams aren't grouped regionally by geographic location anymore. And really, the big one is the next weekend when they get down to the Sweet 16, that they're sort of regionally based. But that sort of doesn't make sense to me, and it can create an advantage to some of these teams when it comes to traveling or not traveling.
Well, and I think the NCAA would come back and argue against you that we do geographically seed you the higher up you are. That's part of your reward. As you look at UK and Louisville, who will both be traveling to very close to Indianapolis for their first 2 games. So I think that's probably what the NCAA would come back and argue with you. They changed that a few years ago, where it used to be that this coming weekend, the Midwest games would all be played in the Midwest, but some of the teams were having to travel, and they did that to try to cut down on the travel. But again, then you have the crazy, again, to think of it in Cincinnati, we have UC, who is in the South Regional, going to the West Coast, and Xavier, who's in the West Regional, who's going down to Southern Florida or Central Florida to play their first 2 games. So I think they try to solve one problem and maybe create another one. So, and with 68 teams, you're not going to make everybody happy.
No, you're not. And the other thing is, and we have to acknowledge that there are fewer colleges in the West, and fewer of them in there, and they got to try to balance it. You're always going to play that what if. So let's get beyond that and talk about. Let's talk about this too. When you look at it, I don't know how much time you've had a chance to see. Every year there are the upsets. To give you an idea, I mean, just last year we saw a 2 go down to a 15, a 3 go down to a 14, a 4 go down to a 13, 2 5s go down to 12s, and 3 6s go down to 11s in this first week. With the parity that we've had, is that going to happen again? Is this the first year we see a 16 beat a 1? Is there a vulnerable 2 out there? We could see another 2 over 15. Of course, the most common one is the 5 over the 12. And looking at this first round, where are you seeing your big upsets?
Oh, I'm going to call one right here, okay?
Jimmy the Reese, about to speak. Get your pencil ready.
15 over 2. Northern Kentucky University over the University of Kentucky.
Get out of town. Get out of town. Come on, give us your reason here.
Well, again, it's close. It's actually closer for NKU. I think they're a little more experienced as far as age. They have nothing to lose. This is their national championship game. We've seen at times the UK comes in not focused with their young players. They're playing in Indianapolis. They're playing at, I believe, 10 o'clock on Friday night. Talk about a time when an 18-year-old could be unfocused. I don't know. I just get a feeling that NKU is going to shock the world. And, of course, this will be – and I don't see them winning a national championship or anything, but for one night, they will be the kings of Kentucky.
Oh, well, that is bold talk. I'll tell you, I see it the other way. I think it's going to be a UK beatdown to their cousins from the north, but you just never know.
So who are you picking? What's your big upset? Because we know there's going to be one, like you said. So can you give us an insight into what you think will be the biggest upset, or maybe one or two?
Looking at some of the things, I think the one primed for the 5-12 upset would be Middle Tennessee State. They're going to go against the Minnesota team that you never know what you're going to face. And they've had a 9-game winning streak. They've had an 8-game losing streak. And the Big Ten being soft, Middle Tennessee is coming in very hot. Not really an upset because it's just a 10-7. I think Wichita State was seated kind of low, and I think they'll take Dayton fairly easily. And the only other one I really have in that sort of category is I think Rhode Island is going to take a wounded Creighton. I know you don't like to hear that, being the Big East man, but I think Rhode Island is just in a position at the right time. Then they'd have to play a wounded Oregon, too, so they might even get out of the first weekend the way they're playing. But I'd say the big one is going to be Middle Tennessee State. Well, that's a 12 over a 5. I don't see anybody going any bigger on its face, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I think Princeton is going to give Notre Dame fits in another 5-12, but Notre Dame will win out in the end. But it is that year where, I think there's only about 8 or 9 teams that can really win it all, but in this first weekend, there's lots of teams that could take out other teams. I just don't have the surety list.
Yeah, and you, again, I said last week, and I will continue to say it. I think, and this is what you were just talking about, the leagues. This is where the leagues some will start beating their chest and others will cower away because, again, they will start playing each other. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think the Big East will be at least 5-2, if not 6-1. And, again, it's been a murderous schedule. They play each other twice. And I think that we'll see that start to show as they start to play other leagues. And here I'm going to make this prediction, too. Purdue will be the only Big Ten team left after this week. Again, I think the Big Ten has been kind of weak. Again, after they play each other, they kind of, think they're better than they are. Wisconsin maybe, but I don't think Wisconsin's quite as good as they have been. And some people would say, well, what about Michigan? I think, again, Michigan, after that fairy tale week last week, I think they're going to be distracted a lot. I'm sure every media outlet wants to do a story about Michigan and everything that happened last week and how they won that tournament. I think they're going to be a little distracted, and I don't see them getting past the weekend. So, again, I'm going to say Purdue, the only Sweet 16 Big Ten member. And, again, I'm thinking the Big East will have at least 5. And, of course, the ACC is going to have probably 4 or 5 also with the strength they've had all year long.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why you play the games. There could be a lot of things going on. The ACC be strong. I don't see the Big East being as strong as you do, but you know the Big East better than I do. It's just a season where you don't know because of the way they've played, and so many teams with topsy-turvy. Those top 10 are going to be there, but I think everybody's vulnerable to a certain level. Like you've got Kentucky, which is a 2 seed going out in the first round, but even if they make it through, they got to face probably a very tough Wichita State team. UCLA, they're at the number 3. They're probably going to have to play Cincinnati, and if Cincinnati falters, it'll be Wake Forest or Kansas State. There's no easy games at this point. Even some of those, play-in games are going to go right down to the wire. But you hit on something that also happened in tournament week last week. Is these guys are playing for their lives. They know now it's win or go home, and if you're not ready to go, that's why sometimes the ones and the 6s can be vulnerable with those playing games. Like you said, that the team plays on Tuesday. They're a little more sparky, and the other team's had 3 or 4 days rest, and they might get off to a slow start. So that's why they play the game. So you've made that. Now, here's the other thing I'd like to ask is which number 1 do you think is going to fall first? You got Nova, Zaga, North Carolina, and Kansas. And last year, only one number 1 seed went to the Final Four. Nova wasn't the number 1 seed. And they haven't begun. I think the year before that, 3 went, but there haven't been many number 1 seeds going to the Final Four in the past 5-6 years.
Yeah, even longer than that, I think. I think I saw a graphic back to 2007. And, yeah, I think it was 2015. There were 3 number 1s.
Yeah.
Back the last 10 years, there's been only one, and there was 1 year when there wasn't any. Mm-hmm. So which one will go down first? I'll go in reverse order. I think North Carolina has the best chance of making it to the Final Four. After that, I think it's kind of close between Nova and Kansas. And I know a lot of people think maybe this is the year of the Zags, but again, I think the weakness of their schedule is going to play out. I think the Zags will go down first. They won't make it out of the West, even though the West some people consider is one of the weakest overall regions. So it'll be fun to watch. But I guess I'll say the Zags will be the ones to go down first.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there, and I'll have faith in that. But they'd have to get by. If they win their first round game, they're going to be facing. I've got them facing a Northwestern team, which is running hot in their first year in the tournament. So who knows if they'll come in giddy. But after that, they'll probably have to either face anybody they would face, whether it's Princeton after an upset, but it could be Notre Dame or West Virginia. And I think both of those teams will give them fits. And even if they get through there, they're probably going to be facing, Arizona. And so that's going to be tough thing. Arizona hoping to get into the Final Four for the first time under Sean Miller, and of course it's be close to a home game since they're just down the road in Tucson from Glendale when they get there. But you're right. I think the North Carolina and Kansas very strong. I think the 2 seeds are the ones to also watch. That's where you got Kentucky, Arizona, Duke, Louisville, and then the 3 seeds are no wins either. So it's going to be a very, very interesting tournament, and that leads us to our next question, which is, if you got Villanova sort of as your third one, can they repeat?
No. I think it's so hard. I think it's so hard to repeat because they're going to get everybody's best shot every game. Because again, it's that kind of like the NKU versus UK. It's that if you beat the defending national champion, you still have you can hang your hat on that, even if you don't win it all. So I think this Nova team, in fact, if you watch the Big East semifinals, they were lucky to win over Seton Hall. In fact, it took a missed shot put back in by Josh Hart. Now, I give him credit because he went for it and knew how it was coming off and had that experience. But again, they were very, very close to not even making it to the finals of the Big East tournament again, because they're going to get everybody's best shots. And I think a big physical team might be able to wear them down a little bit. They play a little bit undersized underneath. So I don't think they'll make it. It'd be a great story because, it's a very, very tough thing to do to win 2 in a row. Hasn't been done since Florida, I think, back in about 06, 07, and I think it's going to be a long time for somebody does it again.
Yeah. Well, they are there as the number 1 overall seed, but it's always been like a back end. They put them up there, but nobody's really talking about them as much as they are a Kansas or North Carolina or a hot Duke or the strength of UCLA. So yeah, people are coming after them. The Big East tournament to me isn't that big of a deal because, like I said, the Big East doesn't go the chest-pounding route like the ACC does. Nova knew they were in. I'm sure they wanted to beat Seton Hall and did, and they wanted to win it all. But you remember Seton Hall beat them in the final last year, and that didn't stop them from going all the way. Like you said, this year they are a 1 seed, and some people are going to be going at them, but it's almost like they're a forgotten repeat champion in many ways. And if you want to call a repeater flying on the radar, I would think it would be Nova. It looks like North Carolina and Kansas, especially Gonzaga, have got a little more pressure on them as the ones. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And you're right, nobody's repeated since 06, 07 with Billy Donovan's Florida team. There's only been 15 schools in the history of the tournament that have even won 2 or more titles. And there's only been 7 schools that have been able to repeat, and there's a total of I don't know how many times, because Wooden did it 1, 2, 3, like 6 or 7 times, because you had those 7 in a row. So it must have been 6 times in repeating. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. The other side of it is, every decade but the 80s, has had a repeat champion. And if the 2000 teams are going to have a repeat champion, this might be the time, because then you just got the 2 years, 18 and 19 to get it done. And the other side of the coin is they are the only team that has a chance to repeat. So you got to put that in their favor. Everybody else is just hoping to win it all. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see. Are there any of the coaches out there that you think? I mean, you've already mentioned Tom. Maybe Tom Izzo got in because he's Tom Izzo. You look at it, we've got 7 coaches in the tournament who have won it before. There were, 4 who didn't make it that are in Division One who've won a championship before. But do you see any coach that has a inside track to another championship, or a bigger target on his back?
I'm just in the mood to make UK fans really happy. I'm going to say Rick Pitino, kind of flying under the radar, played in that tough ACC all year long. Again, that's a team I think is going to come out. They've been battle tested, had to play the North Carolinas, the Dukes, the Notre Dames, and everybody in that league, and he's been there before and knows how to get there. So as I was doing my bracket, I kind of looked at it looks like they could start to sneak in before anybody realized they were there. So, yeah, I'd say Rick Pitino might be able to, and maybe he's got a little bit of a, with everything that went on there at Louisville, this would be kind of his way of getting back at the NCAA, kind of like Brady with Goodell in the NFL with all that happened there.
Oh, interesting thinking. Interesting in total. For me, it would probably be, Bill Self, who, even though he's got his one, it was almost 10 years ago in 2008. A lot like Coach Dean Smith down there in North Carolina. He won one, went to so many Final Fours, couldn't get it, and I got over the hump, and then everybody's sort of saying, where's your next one? And I think there's a lot of pressure on Kansas to bring another one home. The others, Coach Cal, it's reloading every year. Krzyzewski, he's got 5. There's no pressure on him. Pitino's got his 2. Williams has got 2. I think it's those guys with the single ones that have a little more pressure. And I think Izzo knows he doesn't have a team for the long run, so there's not a whole lot of pressure there. So it will be interesting. So is it going to be one of those guys, or somebody new, one of the hot coaches? Mark Few going to pick up his first, or Sean Miller, or Steve Alford get in there? You just never know. I mean, to me, it would be neat to see Southern Methodist make this run. They came out of nowhere in the American. I don't think they're going to, because they're not as battle tested, but I think Coach Yankovic down there is definitely should be on the list for Coach of the Year. Took a team that was in turmoil and replaced a Hall of Famer, a legend, in Larry Brown, and has them hot at the right time and winning their division. So there's lots of coaches out there that could pull it off all the way.
Yeah, you talk about SMU. The other thing, they're playing kind of a short bench, which they've gotten away with. But if they run up against somebody who's playing 8 or 9 guys and very, very physical, I think that might be their doing in, especially in the second game. I know they ran through the American, but again, the American wasn't very tough this year. So be interesting to see. One other factor that I kind of look at is, I think Purdue and Kansas are in this boat, that they lost out in the first round of their conference tourney, which gives them a little bit more rest and preparation time. And again, those top programs, sometimes when they get that, that might be to their benefit versus a Duke who, played 4 games in a row and very, very tough games, all of them. And now they got to turn around, although they won't play till Thursday or Friday. But still, you got to think that takes a little bit out of a team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see Duke having pretty much the easiest ride into the Elite 8 of a lot of the teams, so that may help them there. But that's what's fun. The games start tomorrow night with the 4 play-in games, and that's Kansas State versus Wake Forest, Mount St. Mary's versus New Orleans, Providence versus Southern California, and North Carolina Central is also going to be playing there against UCD. So those 4 games will determine the 16 seeds. and the 11 seeds in two of the brackets. There's one to go to each. People don't really look at those. And then the dance really gets started very early on Thursday. America will shut down around noon on Thursday as that first round gets going, and then there'll be lots of basketball through the weekend, and we'll be able to come back to you on next Tuesday, and we'll talk about all the fun that happened and look at our Sweet 16 picks and see where we're going to go with our Final Four picks as well. What other thoughts do you have before we go into wrap-up mode here with the trivia and tidbits, or anything else that you want to get before we get to the first weekend?
Well, one last thought, and you kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier, but let's think about the 2016-17 season as a whole and the upsets. And I remember there were weeks when it seemed like we were saying 15 of the top 25 lost, and it's just been one of those years where we've had crazy, the Fort Wayne over IU, although maybe that wasn't as big a win or upset as we thought it was at the time. I just think this tournament, this time next week or so, we'll be talking about something really crazy like Northern Kentucky beating UK. Just remember, it's been probably the craziest season. I don't think it's going to stop with the NCAA tournament.
I'm sure we'll have some crazy games here and there, as we always do, and you just never know until they pop out, and that's the fun of the NCAA. So we wish everybody good luck, and we'll be talking about it on our TrogCast next Tuesday. Also, basketball fans, we'll be talking about Xavier's run in their tournament and also going into the NCAA tournaments on Thursday before things get started. So join us for that Razor Cast, and we'll continue it until the end of their run, and we'll continue our TrogCast on through the end of the NCAAs and a little beyond that. So, Jim, I'm sure there's lots of fodder here for you to have stacked up some trivia against me, so fire away.
Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
I got some tough ones today, so you've been doing your homework.
Today be any different?
So here we go. Number one, can you name the lowest seed to ever make a Sweet 16? I will give you a hint. It's happened within the last 5 years.
The lowest seed to make a Sweet 16. Wow, and it's happened within the last 5 years, you said.
Mm-hmm.
That is a tough one. Well, it's got to be, probably one of those upsets that we talked about.
Let me give you, I don't know if you remember this, they nicknamed them Dunk City.
Oh, well, they're back. That must be Florida Gulf Coast then.
Number 15, Florida Gulf Coast in 2013, upset number 2, Georgetown, and then number 7, San Diego State to make it to the Sweet 16.
It's just in my mind trying to pick out, and like I said, there's so many. The past 5 years, there's been I looked that up. There's been 8 2-over-15s, and 4 of those have been in the last 5 years. So yeah, it's such a more even tournament now. Go ahead. Okay, that's one. What else you got?
Name the school that's been in at least 4 national championship games without losing one.
Been in 4 championship
at least
games.
4 national championship games and have not lost one.
Well, there's only so many teams that have won 4, and obviously if they've been in 4 championship games and they've never lost one, thinking about that, I'd have to go with UConn.
You are correct.
Yeah.
The Connecticut Huskies.
Because I can't remember them ever losing, whereas a lot of like UCLA has lost one, and Kentucky's lost it, Indiana's lost one, Duke lost a few times before they went on their run. But there's only a handful of teams that have got 4 wins. So,
we may have talked about this before, but I'll ask you anyway. Who holds the record for the most points scored in an NCAA tournament game?
The person?
The person.
The person.
The person.
Is that still the Goose from Kentucky?
Nope. I'll give you a hint. Notre Dame.
I was thinking finals game. It's any game? Okay.
Yeah, any game.
Any game. I think Deuce has still got it for the final game. A hint from Notre Dame, I'd have to right away go with Adrian Dantley.
Nope, a little bit earlier, 1970, against an early game against the OU Bobcats.
And did he have a name?
He had a name, Austin Carr.
Austin Carr. Oh, of course, yeah, Austin. Yeah, we did talk about that earlier.
61 points.
Yep. We did talk about that.
Points against the OU Bobcats. Here's the one, and you're going to probably question this, but the number one seed, this school had number one seed 3 times in history and lost all 3 of their first games.
A number one seed and lost their first game 3 times.
All 3 times.
You dig deep for these things, I tell you. I'm not even going to venture a guess on that one. It could be so many teams that they lost the very first game.
1980 to 1982, the DePaul Blue Demons. Now, in those days, DePaul got a bye every time, but they lost to the winner of the play-in game that they played all 3 of those years.
Well, I know
here's
one. The year of '81, they lost big. They were expected to be in it, but before Indiana won it all.
I'll give you a hint on this one. Who was the last player who was the most valuable player in a final game, but his team lost?
Tell us, Jim.
I'll give you a hint.
And to remind everybody, he used to have one question for me. He started to have one trivia question. Now he's digging up dead bodies and putting body parts together. Go ahead and tell the world who that was. I should probably know it. I know it, but it's just my brain's starting to hurt.
Houston's Akeem Olajuwon, of course, when North Carolina State upset him in 1983 with Jimmy Valvano. And the last one. Name the player who has played in the most NCAA tournament games with 23.
23.
So he had to play all 4 years
play all 4 years
school.
And basically go to the Final Four all 4 years.
Here, I'll give you a hint.
If I need a hint, I'll let you know. I would say it's probably somebody from that Duke run in the early '90s, or I'd say so. Is it Bobby Hurley or Christian Laettner, or is it Grant Hill?
Christian Laettner. I was going to tell you he's probably the most unpopular person in the state of Kentucky, and you probably would have got it from that.
Well, if you keep making these 95-part questions, you're going to win that title. I'll tell you. No, that's great.
I actually came across a website today. You know what it's titled?
Ways to trip up Jeff Zink on the TrogCast.com?
That was something to the effect, the hardest NCAA questions to ask your friends.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to do your research.
You got to do your research. And, of course, now you probably know this, but I'll just throw it out to you. What was the first team to repeat in the NCAA?
Was that San Francisco Dons in the 50s?
Oh, good question. They did repeat, but actually Hank Iba's Oklahoma A&M team were the first ones in 45. Hank Iba, if you don't know who he is, look back at that 1972 Olympic game. He was the coach that had to storm the castle when they gave the Soviets 3 places in. He took his It's Aggie.
Oklahoma A&M is Oklahoma State now, right?
Oklahoma State now is what they go by. But also even before Phil Wolpert in San Francisco, Coach Rupp got a repeat in there in the late 40s as well. There's only been a few teams other than those three. Cincinnati's Ed Jucker repeated, and John Wooden, as we already said, Coach K's got a repeat, and Billy Donovan. So there aren't that many coaches who've had a chance to repeat, and there aren't that many coaches that have multiple titles. So whether it's the first one or a repeat one, we wish everybody the best of luck. A few tidbits to end things up with. Just a little astronomy coincidence. It was on this date in 1781 that astronomer William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus, which he named Georgium Sidus in honor of King George III. What's coincidence about that is on this date in 1855, Percival Lowell was born, and he was the astronomer who predicted that they would discover Pluto by the movement of the planets. And Pluto's been a planet and then not a planet. In fact, I'm not really sure what sort of limbo Pluto's in anymore, but I found that a nice coincidence. And another nice coincidence in sports history was on this date in 1992 that Chick Hearn, the famous broadcaster for the Los Angeles Lakers, called his 2,500th consecutive Laker game, a streak that began in 1965, and he would continue on to call 3,338 games in a row, so another 10 years beyond that before he had to miss some games for a medical issue. And it also was on this date in 1999 that A.C. Green played in his 1,000th consecutive game in the NBA. And he would continue on to establish the record that he still holds of 1,192 consecutive games. That's 286 games, or well over 3 NBA seasons from the next person closest to him. And the current NBA streak is only 427. So Tristan Thomas is only 9 more seasons away from catching A.C. Green. What's great about A.C. Green is he only missed 3 games in his entire career, and those were in his second year of play. So that's out for the Iron Horses out there. And we say that to the Iron Horses that will be out on the court for 40 minutes or more as these teams fight to crown an NCAA championship in Glendale, Arizona on April 3rd. So this year, your 2 Trogs, Jim Reaker and Jeff Zink, thank you for joining us. And we'll be back here again next Tuesday to talk about the first exciting weekend of the NCAA tournament.